All right. So good morning. How is everybody this morning? Hopefully good. I do need to pull up my chat box just so I can see it. So this morning we're going to talk about volunteer management resources and then service to community, give you some resources for both you at the county level and then also for your clubs. So we're going to start by talking about the volunteer resources. So I want to start by just talking about what volunteers look like. So when you think about kind of what, I don't like to use the word traditional, but what most people think of when they think of volunteers. They are middle-aged white females with middle to high income, married with children, and they do not work outside the home. So do you guys think that that's really what is out there? You know, is that the bulk of your volunteers now? You guys?
No.
No, exactly. They are not. So when you look at the demographics, now our volunteers, I mean, we do have a lot of those individuals, but 29.4% of all volunteers are women, 32.3% are married, 28.9% are between the ages of 35 and 40. That's the highest percentage. 27.2% are employed and 43% are college graduates. Now, this isn't Nevada 4-H volunteers. This is volunteers as a whole. And from the I believe this one is, well, it's from several sources, but one is Department of Labor Statistics gives, they have volunteer statistics. Also the National Corporation for Community Service, or I can't remember the exact name of it, but there are some. But then I think it's interesting where volunteers live. And where they volunteer. So 35% of volunteers live in urban areas, 56% live in suburban areas, and 9% live in rural areas, which I find interesting. Probably in Nevada, obviously, that's going to be a little bit different, but nationally, that's what our statistics are. And if you look at volunteers, you know, look at by race, 26.4% are white, 19.3% are black, 17.9% are Asian, and 15.5% are Hispanic. Where people volunteer, the highest percentage that people volunteer at are within churches. And you can see that percentage point, 25.2% volunteer in education and youth organizations. So that's where 4-H fits in the categories. Social and community service organizations, 14.6. So that would be like Rotary, Kiwanis, those types of organizations. There's more in there, but I just included the top 3. And then I found the next one, the generations that volunteer. I actually found this one really interesting because I didn't think Gen X was as high as it was, but so you can see those percentages. You know, we still have quite a few of the silent generation, which are, you know, is a generation above the baby boomers, and I believe baby boomers started in about 1946. So, but there's still quite a few of those individuals volunteering in our communities. So we can't forget about, you know, all of these age groups. My guess is the reason why Gen X is so high at this point is because many of them have children in, you know, in a lot of organizations, you know, involved. And so that's my guess why it's higher. I just didn't think that Gen Xers volunteered that much. And then if you also, volunteers, what's really important about our volunteers to me, I mean, not the only thing, we can't do our program without our volunteers, but I find it interesting that they give more money to charities than non-volunteers. So 66% of people that volunteer are more likely to donate money to nonprofits or to that charity or to a variety of charities. 25% of all volunteers average more than 5 hours per week. They say that the average is about 50 hours per year for what volunteers give. And I also found this one, we need to be thinking about this, is 67% of volunteers found that opportunity online. So we need to be, making sure that both our social media and our web presence has, the information about how somebody can volunteer. And I know at the state level, we need to get that upgraded on our website. The information isn't easily found and isn't probably, as good as it could be on what are the steps, who do you need to call to volunteer. But I know, that does make sense because I probably get at least 1 to 2 emails a week, either from somebody wanting to volunteer or somebody wanting to get their kids involved in 4-H. And so that to me tells me that they're looking online for those resources. So volunteers who work with multiple organizations tend to give more. So nearly 1 in 5 or 18% of those involved in 4 or more volunteer programs give more than 5 hours each time they volunteer. So, when you have volunteers that are involved in a lot of things, the research shows that they're going to give more time. And nearly half of volunteers who give more than 5 hours each time that they volunteer said they're much more willing to make that financial contribution. And 83% of respondents said were at least somewhat willing to donate or make an in-kind or in-kind donation. Now, we know most of our 4-H volunteers do in-kind donations because they'll go buy supplies out of their own pocket for the kids. And so just something to keep involved. And then as we look at why people volunteer, they volunteer for a variety of reasons. To belong, to give. A lot of colleges and especially high schools nowadays are requiring service hours or volunteer hours in order to graduate. They want recognition. They want to receive training. When I was in the county, I had a lot of students that wanted to be veterinarians, and what they did in high school was they went and volunteered at the local vet clinic. That way, when they got into vet school, you pretty much can't get into vet school unless you have volunteered or worked in a vet clinic. It's very, very difficult. So that was their training that they were looking for that training. They want to acquire skills. They want to be on a team. They want to have fun. They want to be part of problem solving. I'm one of those people that if I see something in an organization that I don't like, something that I feel like needs to be changed, I'm going to be the first one to step up and say, I want to be part of that change, part of that problem solving. And so, because I feel like I can't complain about something unless I'm willing to be there to make that change. Test out career possibilities. We get that a lot in the state 4-H office. Hey, I'm interested in a career in extension. Is there, are there any opportunities? One of my long-term goals, but it's just finding the funding at this point, is to try to put together some kind of internship program that we could have where, our youth could go work, or our college students could go work in a county office for a summer. And I think some of you do have that. I know Clark has had that. And I think some of even the smaller counties have had interns working there because they're interested in a job in extension or a job in 4-H. And so it's a way for them to see what that's like. They want to get some work experience. Fresh out of college, it's tough to get a job sometimes. It's good to have that work experience. They want to make friends. When you move to a new community, that's a great way to make friends. One thing that we might think about when we're thinking about recruiting volunteers is working with some of your local real estate agents. And when they're selling homes to people, you know, most of the time you get a packet from that real estate agent that has local resources for you. This could, you know, there could be a flyer in there about how do they join, you know, how do they get there, if there's kids, how do they get their kids involved in 4-H, if they, you know, and how do they volunteer, you know. And I would hit on some of these points of making friends, and, you know, you can meet new people in the community. They want to use skills. You know, we see that a lot with our STEM programs. When we get volunteers, a lot of times they're coming to us because they have specific skills around STEM, or maybe we've gone to a company. I know, you know, we've gone into Micron, if you know what Micron is, and utilize some of their engineers, or some of these firms that have engineers to help with robotics. So they're using those skills, and they want to develop leadership. But the number one reason why people volunteer is because they were asked. Very rarely are you going to get, I mean, you're going to get, you know, a few here, you know, a few, but you're not going to get a lot of volunteers to just walk in the door and say, hey, I'm here to volunteer. How, you know, do you, I know most of you find your volunteers because you ask them, or they're in a club and that club leader asks them to volunteer. I know with my own family, I mean, I am married to somebody that will not just step up and volunteer. He gets so mad at me because I do just step up. It's like, oh, I see a need and I need to, you know, somebody needs to volunteer. And his comment to me is always, well, somebody else will do it. And it's like, no, nobody else will do it, so I will do it. And his reaction is, if they ask him, he will step up and volunteer, but it's not until somebody asks him to do that. And so you have to think about that, you know, and do that. In fact, the research shows that 44% of volunteers do so because they were asked. So some volunteer insights, some things that volunteers said. The reason why is 83% said they want to contribute to a cause that they care about. You know, 66% said they wanted to improve their community. 63% spend time doing something that I'm interested in. You know, 7% were for family related reasons. 8% is mandatory for school or another organization, etc. And then if you look at trends, some more trends, 84% of the volunteers at least, you know, volunteered at least a few times a week, and you can see those percentages. You know, they say on average that the average volunteer actually gives more than 50 hours a year. And then some of our Nevada statistics, I found this really interesting. We rank 49th in people volunteering. And so only 24.4% of our population in Nevada volunteer with some kind of organization. In comparison, Utah ranks number 1, and they have 51.1% of their population volunteering. Now, I know, you know, in my mind, I'm pretty sure I know why that is the case, but, you know, that's quite a difference. And if you look at this, you know, if you look, that is, you know, quite a bit of, look through the list. The areas that people in Nevada volunteer, one, the highest reason that they volunteer, area that they volunteer, is mentoring youth. Or tutor or teach. They also like to volunteer to fundraise. The number one reason nationally, like, that people volunteer, or area that they volunteer in, is to collect, prepare, distribute, or serve food. You can see that's number 4 in Nevada. And then general labor or provide transportation for organizations, that's 23.99%. So these are just the top 5. You know, obviously there's a whole bunch of others. And then the types of organizations that people volunteer: sports, hobby, cultural or arts is 24.59. So when you volunteer with your child's sports team, etc., or something that you're interested in.
Other is 24.5. They really didn't say. And these are found on the Corporation for National and Community Service website, if you're interested in seeing more of this. They also, just so Clark County knows too, they have Las Vegas, Henderson broke out by their percentages of volunteering. Same type of information, but just for that area. 12.28% volunteer for education or youth service. I kind of think 4-H almost fits between the first category with the sports, hobby, cultural, or arts, because we get a lot of volunteers because that's their hobby, and so they come to us for that, but also the education and youth service. And then you can see last year we had 572,000 Nevada residents that volunteered. And if you were to, look at the economic value of that, it's $1.8 billion into the area. What that is there's a company called Independent Sector that does figure out the value of a volunteer per hour. I think nationally it's like $24.14 an hour. I didn't look up Nevada, but they actually have it by state as well. Typically it's based on the economy in that state, and they come out with a new number every year. So a lot of times if you're writing a grant or doing something and you want to use, you need to have a match, and you can use an InKind match for that. If you have volunteers in that organization that are in that program, you can use their volunteer hours as a match, because we have that number of, and then we also like to, and this is something that I'm looking at trying to figure out how we can collect, is the number of hours that a volunteer gives every year to 4-H, so we can figure out this economic impact. And then this article is older, and I realize it's from the 80s, but I think it's really interesting, and I know that it's still true today, because I think we have even more volunteer programs for our communities. But 1 in 80 Americans has served in some sort of volunteer capacity with cooperative extension. So about 2.9 million people. So that could be master gardener, 4-H. It could be if some states have master food preservers. It just depends on what you have in your program. And Nora, that's I've got to figure out how we can. A lot of states do track volunteer hours. I've got to look into it a little bit more. I think there's a way that we can do it through the new management system. I think we can have volunteers obviously we can't track them specifically, but we could have them enter the number of hours that they volunteered that year. So I know it's a state law in Washington that volunteers have to submit the number of hours, and it's not extension. All volunteers in the state of Washington have to submit the number of hours that they gave to different organizations. So I know it can be done, I just have to figure it out. So, if you look at money, we look at that 51 days for every day that an extension professional works with volunteers. That's 5 times the entire cooperative extension budget. And then, communities would pay about $4.5 billion annually for these services. So, again, it's an old study, but it's kind of just interesting to think about our volunteers in that aspect. So some of the philosophies around volunteer development and youth development, 4-H relies, and thrives on the strong ethics of volunteerism. This is a really important thing for extension and 4-H. Obviously you all know that we could not do our jobs if we did not have our volunteers. Quality programs occur in 4-H because of these strong partnerships.
to have a comprehensive volunteer system that includes both the management and of the resources and the development of the individuals is critical. Now, I will tell you, you know, a lot of you know that one of our big pushes, one of our big requests in the enhancement request that we are putting forth to the legislature, even though our plan is to still put it forward. There's not much hope, but we figured we got to try. But one of our big requests is a volunteer specialist. While that's being, while we're working on that, we have been able to, they're in the process right now of hiring somebody to do volunteer coordinator out of Clark County. They will be working in Clark County, but many of the projects that they're doing will be beneficial for the state. So we've got, so hopefully we'll be able to get some additional resources for everybody around volunteer management and volunteer development. So, but it is critical at the county level that you are, that you're conducting trainings, that you're preparing our volunteers. As new volunteers come in, we need to be doing orientation with them. It is really important that we do that. That, we need to have that commitment to the involvement of youth and adults as partners. And what that means is that, especially at the club level, this is something we really need to talk to our volunteers about. And there's some really good trainings out there some really good materials that I can connect you with. We're also very fortunate, and we have I consider him one of the leaders in youth adult partnerships especially in the Western region, in Brian, he's the graduate student that works for me. His area of expertise is really youth adult partnerships and has been working in it his whole career. And so, but what that means is the adults are not leading the club. They're not making the decisions for the youth, but the youth have that voice as well. That's why even at the county level, when you're thinking about your leaders councils, there needs to be youth on that leaders council. And it's not, when you look at, I won't go into all the specifics. I mean, we could do like 8 days of training on youth adult partnerships, but it shouldn't be one youth and 20 adults. There really should be, when you think about if each club has representatives to the leaders council, it really should be one adult and one youth on the leaders councils rather than just the adults, because they're making decisions for the program and the youth should be involved in that. And the youth, that's a volunteer opportunity for those youth. That's a great opportunity for them. And then recognition for volunteering, that we recognize that volunteering is a two-way process. It has to benefit both the volunteers and the program itself. So organizations like Extension, in which volunteer development is recognized as a profession, we really do feel like, well, and it makes sense because our volunteers are put into Workday as contingent workers. They are considered employees of the university, just unpaid. But there is that benefit from volunteer involvement. There's research that shows specific competencies that are needed by our volunteer program managers. So that would be our county staff. And that's where the 4-H PRKC is a good resource for that. There are a whole bunch of competencies, and I was gonna share that. I don't think I saved it. What I'm gonna do is I'll put this in the box account, and I'll put the PRKC in there. One of the domains is volunteerism. Now, granted, I know that you guys are not gonna all have all of the competencies in the volunteerism domain. And so, but it's a good way for you to start looking at it and, oh, what are some things I think I might, and then look for professional development opportunities around that area. And volunteering in the digital age. So, you know, we all know, especially as adult, or, you know, as we're moving into more digital learning, you know, with everything going on right now, it really is, this is research that they have found, is 89% of volunteers prefer a digital platform over pen and pencil. So as we move into our new enrollment system, it's not, we're still, you know, we're still using 4-H Online, but it's a whole new system because they've revamped it completely. You need to have trust that your volunteers know what they're doing, and that they will not, you know, that they can, you know, it's going to be probably more, it's going to be not necessarily mandatory, but getting close to mandatory, that you allow volunteers to have access to, you know, to their club information, and that parents enroll their own child. You know, we know that not everybody has access to internet, but I will tell you the new system is mobile compatible, so it'll be easy for them to do on their phones. So it's, you know, there's going to be we know that there will still be need to be some pen and paper, but that should be the exception rather than the norm. So, and Jamie, I don't think that they can record time through Workday. I don't, but that's something I can look into. I'm hoping that we can do it more in the 4-H Online enrollment system, but I'll look at Workday and see what, you know, I don't want them to have to log in every time and log their time. That would not be fun for them nor for you. So, you know, volunteers find new opportunities online through friends and by networking. And 3 out of 4 volunteers prefer in-person training. And I think we all know that. I think we all prefer in-person training. But, you know, I think it's good at the county level if we can do as many in-person trainings as we can do. At the state level, it's a little more difficult. A couple years ago, we tried to do state leaders forum, and I think we ended up having 5 people register. We had one date, didn't have anybody. We switched a date that everybody said would work better, and we had 5 people register, and of that, I think at least 2 of them were staff. So I kind of gave up on face-to-face. You know, we're trying to do some of the face-to-face stuff, like at Expo, we had a couple of adult volunteer trainings. I don't know how well attended they were, probably not as well attended as we would have liked to have had. The teen ones were good, but the adult ones not so much, but we're trying to offer some things like that. I think it just is good, but if we can do more of the Zoom type trainings at the state level, you know, that's what we're really trying to do. And then they can get face-to-face at the county. Are there any questions just about some of that data? Because I'm going to go into some of the resources on volunteer management, and volunteer development. These are not going to be, I mean, I'm going to talk briefly about our process for applications, you know, how we go through a process to have volunteers. But I really want to talk from your level at the county level. What are some things that are going to help you be a better volunteer manager? So the things that I'm going to share with you is the Isotherm model, our National 4-H Learning Priorities, the VRKC, and the National 4-H website. There's actually a lot of really good resources on that website. So the Isotherm model has been around for a long time. It's not specific to 4-H, but we have, you know, 4-H has really kind of adopted this. It's a great model to think about. So you can see what Isotherm stands for. So as we look at specifics for identification, all of our volunteers need to have a job description or a position description. That includes a title, a general description. What are the purposes and benefits? What are the skills required? What are specific responsibilities that they're going to have? What are expected results? What are some resources, some supervision, location, and time involved? I do have examples of many of these, and I'm trying to think if they got put in the policies and procedures or not. If not, they were supposed to be on, I know that they were on the website at one time, but I can't guarantee that they're there. I will put those examples in the box account, in the Nevada box account, so that you guys have access to them when I put the resources from the webinar. And then I'll figure out where they are. And hopefully you guys, so that way you don't have to create them. There's one for a general organizational leader. So somebody that's kind of the overall leader of a club. If you have multiple leaders, there's one for a project leader. There's one for a camp chaperone. There's one for just a whole variety of things. One of the reasons why this is also really important for you to have at the, that our volunteers have, is if something happens and we have an accident or a lawsuit or some kind of issue, first thing that the lawyers are going to ask me is, or ask you, was, were they working within their job description? And if they're doing something that's outside of their role within the 4-H program, then we have to look at that, because the university may say, okay, we can't represent that person, and so we really need to make sure that they have these. Then our selection. So it's really important that we select the best qualified individual for the volunteer opportunity. Don't select somebody as a volunteer just because they're a warm body. It's really important that we have, because when they're a warm body, that's when we start having issues. And you know what? It's okay. To be a volunteer is a privilege, not a right. And we have to remind our volunteers on a very regular basis. It feels like probably Sarah, Nora, and I remind volunteers when they start complaining about something. We have to remind them, or when they've done something, we have to remind them that it is a privilege, not a right, to be a volunteer. And so, and it's okay, if they want to do, if you just don't feel super comfortable, then that's when you would, if you have somebody come into your office and you don't feel comfortable, there's just something that, you're just not quite sure about, that's when you would call, if you're in the northern area, you would call Sarah. If you're in the southern area, you would call Nora, and they would talk to you about that. And then, probably, potentially ask me. And I want to share a story. I had a gentleman come into my office one time to volunteer. Nice kid. There just was something, that kind of, he was in his early 20s probably. And we did the application, we did the reference checks, and one of his references came back, and this was from the sheriff of our county, came back as, he's a great kid when he's on his medication. And so, and while I knew, I knew that I couldn't not accept him, because we waited quite a while for his background check, but there was just that one thing. And so I called and asked for information, and we worked through the situation. But again, you're going to get those that come back and there's just something off, and it's good to call and talk to somebody about that. This gentleman ended up going to a different county and volunteering in that county, because we really didn't have a role. Like, we didn't have what he wanted to do. We didn't have youth that were interested in that at that point. And so we really didn't have a role for him in the organization. Yes, I could have accepted him and he could have just been there, but I wanted him to have something to do. So, and we all know that there's a lot of stiff competition for volunteers. And so, we need to ask people to volunteer, but the thing is, you need to not just start asking people to volunteer until you know what they're going to be doing. And you can explain to the potential volunteer what they're doing. And so that's really an important, that's why having some of these things already. And need to determine if the potential volunteer has the skills and interests needed to do the job. If you have somebody come in that has skills in cake decorating, but you don't have any youth that are interested in cake decorating, and you ask them to, teach robotics, is that going to be a good fit for them? Probably not if they don't have the skills in robotics. Hey, if they've got skills in robotics, that's another great fit. But, you need to make sure that they match and everybody's successful. So when you look at the volunteer screening process, when we have volunteers, those policies, I know they're a little difficult to find. Paul Lessick and myself are, and then our new volunteer coordinator we've been really trying to figure this out. It's not as easy as it sounds, but I just wanted to let you know kind of some of the pieces. You need to have the volunteer packet. The volunteer packet includes the application, the reference forms, etc. You need to have that completed. You're going to keep that at the county level. You're going to keep that in a locked file drawer. You need to make sure that you do get references. There are reference forms. If you don't have the reference forms, we can get those to you. But you need to make sure you have those references on our volunteers. I think we require 2. It might be 3, but I think it's 2. You need to make sure that the fingerprint packet is completed. That is the forms from thank you, Sharon, it's 3. I couldn't, too many things. That's why I appreciate you guys jumping in when I don't remember those things. But that fingerprint packet is the one from the University Police. It includes all of the information. It also includes the forms that they watched the child protection video, and that they read through the packet. Those need to be completed, and those need to be sent to Paul Lessick. He is at the he's at the state office in Clark County. So if you send it to the Clark County office, it will get there. Also, his information is somewhere, and I'm trying to remember. The fingerprint card needs to be completed. Whether you complete it, whether you roll the fingerprints, or if you have them go to the police, to one of the police stations in your community, and they either do electronic scan or roll their prints. Those need to be completed, and you need to make sure that they are completed. There are examples of the fingerprint card, what it needs to look like as far as being complete. But if you ever have any questions about that, make sure that you can call Paul at any time. He will answer those questions. If you have other questions, I have been out of it long enough now. It's been about a year since I quit doing fingerprints. Sometimes I know the answer, sometimes I don't. But if you feel more comfortable calling me instead of Paul, feel free to call or email me, and I will get the answer for you if I don't know it. I've been doing that a lot lately, so no problem. But that fingerprint card, and you need to make sure that fingerprint card gets to Paul in a timely manner. He was mentioning the other day that he had gotten a fingerprint card in the last month or so that was back from October. We need to get them to him in a more timely fashion. And I know a lot of you have been waiting on fingerprint results, and we figured out where the breakdown was, and they are working on getting, that is being fixed as we speak. So that we should not, unless we're waiting from the university police department or the state, we've got everything else figured out. So the other, and yeah, Sharon, so you might want to shoot an email to Paul and let him know the names of the people that you are waiting on, because he's got it. I think he has it figured out. He probably just hasn't been able to catch up. Yes, and do it today. He is, I know Paul is only working right now 2 days a week. He had too much vacation time, and he had, so he's working like Thursdays and maybe Wednesdays and Thursdays, or Thursdays and Fridays. I know it's Thursdays, so you can contact him on, it might be Wednesdays and Thursdays he's working. So required trainings, I just want to make sure everybody's aware that volunteers need to watch the child protection policy or child protection video from the university, and then the packet that that child protection packet that the university has, they have to watch that and read that every single year, and sign the form that they have done that every year. And then every 6 years, when they start, and then every 6 years after that, they need to complete the online orientation models. And or modules, I will share those in just a few minutes through this, but they need to watch those. And then the child protection self-study guide, they need to complete that every 6 years. So they need to do both of those, you know, when they start, when they're new volunteers, and then when they, every 6 years after that. So, and the online modules are now on the website. So, and yeah, Cindy, I'll put all of those in the box account. Cindy just asked if I could email the form that they need to sign. I will put all of these, I will put as much information as I have, which I think I have most everything now, because Paul and I have been working on a couple things. I will put those in that box account under volunteer selection or volunteer screening. So that way you guys have got them. Any questions? Oh, and then the other piece, I forgot to put that in there, and he's going to hurt me for that one, Paul. The other piece that we have to do, and I know some of you have not been doing it, but it is critical now, and we don't have a choice at this point. Our volunteers must be entered into Workday. He just sent some new guidelines in Workday, or for entering those volunteers into Workday. That's not just new volunteers. All volunteers must be entered into Workday. We've been running into some problems with some things that have happened, and volunteers aren't in Workday, so the university is like, well, they're not volunteers. They may be in 4-H Online, and I know it's double entering, but it's what they're not accepting we have to get them into Workday. If we want them covered under workman's comp, that they have to, if they're asking about the trainings that they're being emailed about, so things like the sexual harassment training, and I think it's mainly the sexual harassment training is the one that they get emailed about all the time. Yes, unfortunately, that is required by the university of our volunteers, but right now I know Paul has been working very hard to try to get our own training for the sexual harassment for volunteers. We used to be able to do our own training, and then they stopped allowing that, but we've been working really, really hard to get our own training, because I mean, I fight it every time I talk to them about that training is worthless for volunteers. So it's geared for faculty and staff and students. And so tell them right now, there is no repercussions at this point for not completing the sexual harassment training. The COVID training, on the other hand, is a completely different story. That there is repercussions, but the sexual harassment training, there is not. So they can do what they want with the sexual harassment training. It does take at minimum an hour, if not a couple of hours, and they cannot do anything else. Like if you try to do something else, it shuts down the training. So you have to go back. So that's what I say about that one. Hopefully soon we will have our own. Okay, any other questions on the selection portion? Okay, orientation. Orientation is really a time to familiarize the volunteer with both the total organization, so extension as a whole and 4-H as a whole, and the specific job that they're going to be doing. So it's really a time that you could do it should be a positive atmosphere for the volunteer. There's a couple of ways that you can do these orientation sessions. One is you could do a general session or a meeting. One thing I used to do when I was in the county is I used to do quarterly volunteer orientations. I didn't have a lot, like I had less than probably 25 new volunteers a year. And so, I sometimes did one-on-ones if it seemed like it was getting to be long, but usually in a quarter I would have at least 5 new volunteers. And so I would do an orientation in the evening, one evening at the office, and really, got that time. We had a volunteer handbook that we would give the volunteers, and I would go through that. It's time for you to go through policies and procedures. The other thing, the first orientation session that we have through here, we talk about what is a land grant, what is extension as a whole, what is 4-H, how those are structured. Those are meant for you to not only learn, but also you can use those with your volunteers. So feel free to use those PowerPoints and those presentations with your volunteers to teach them about the general organization. You can also do one-on-one. A lot of counties do have the volunteers just come into their office and just have a one-on-one session. It could also be a self-directed or take-home lessons. That would be something you could create in your county. Eventually, one of the things that the volunteer coordinator could be working on is what are some of those orientation pieces that every county needs to do. And so, not only would that benefit Clark County, but it would also benefit the rest of the state. And so, trying to, that's one of my goals for that position, especially if we do end up with some money and we are able to hire a statewide evaluation. You know what, Alex, can we fire volunteers? Yes, that actually can be done, but there is a process for that. So that is I would say right now, get a hold of Sarah, and Sarah can start working with you. She'll work with you and Holly and myself to figure that process out. It's not easy, but we've done it several times now. Yeah, just one. That's, we've done it in many counties. I won't name the counties that we've done it, but we have. Again, being a volunteer is a privilege, not a right. And and especially if they are not following the code of conduct, which go back and read the code of conduct, and you'll see that if they're causing problems for the for the office staff, then we have mechanisms. Yes, Jamie, you would call Nora because of your program is overseen by Nora in Pahrump. So it would be Lincoln, Pahrump, and Clark. All 3 offices in Clark would call Nora. Everybody else would call Sarah. Okay, training, some other trainings. It's really to assist volunteers in developing additional knowledge, attitudes, and skills. So there's kind of 3 levels. There's pre-job training that can be done before they start working, on the job training, so you're having trainings for them, and then continuing education. So a couple of things, you know, I'm trying to, at the state level, have at least 2 volunteer trainings a year, one in the spring and one in the fall, that are general topics. You know, we've talked about use of the name and emblem so that our volunteers understand the restrictions for the use of the name and emblem. We've also done social media, you know, how do you, you know, what are our guidelines for social media and how do you utilize social media in your club? We've done, you know, just a whole variety of topics. This last fall, or this last spring, the training we did was, it was more of a group discussion about how can we, you know, getting the input from the volunteers on how can we grow our program. So trying to get them to think about ways that they could look beyond just what, you know, what they do and what are ways that we can grow both the county and state programs. I'm sending the information out. It's not really a training, but you'll get the information later today. But we are going to be doing a information session next week on the phase 2 guidelines to try to help answer some of the questions that you're getting at the county level, some of the questions that from our volunteers, also trying to get, you know, answer some of your questions. So that's going to be next Wednesday night at 5:30 via Zoom. It'll be set up very similar to if any of you participated in the budget meeting, which I don't know how many, but essentially there's a panel. So myself, Sarah, and Nora are going to be explaining the guidelines, and then our volunteers and staff too can submit questions via the question and answer portion. I did, when they register for the, you know, for the session, because I will require, you know, we are requiring registration. There's actually a place in there that they can submit questions ahead of time. So we know what some of the questions are and hopefully can answer some of those. So, but again, you're going to be getting that. I'll send it out in between all of my meetings today. And then utilization of our volunteers, the U in this, putting volunteers to work. You know, nothing worse than having volunteers that have nothing to do. And I will tell you, my first job in extension and in 4-H, I had, actually, she ended up being she was a friend of mine from when I was growing up. I had gone to church with her and gone to school with her pretty much my whole life. And she had moved into the county that I was working in, and she came to the office and wanted to volunteer because she was very involved in 4-H as a child. And so, but she didn't have a club that she wanted to be, like, she didn't know any of the clubs. It was her way of getting to know the people in the county. And so, and I will tell you, I failed miserably on that. You know, she came in and I didn't have a place for her. You know, I should have just immediately called a couple of the clubs in that community and said, here, you know, I've got this volunteer, you know, but I failed miserably on that. So you want to make sure, you know, if somebody does come in that, you know, there might be a job for them. Talk to them. At the time, I didn't realize, oh, I should have these kinds of jobs ready. You know, this is something you could do. I know we've had a couple of volunteers, and I still have to follow up with them. I just haven't, you know, with everything else going on, that are interested in helping at the state level with social media. I think they were from Alexis County. And so, you know, I need to follow up with them about helping, you know, that's a volunteer opportunity for them. And so we, you know, and it's something that I need help on, and I know that. And so we just need to make sure that we follow these, that we have the right person in the right job with the right preparation, that we're delegating, you know, we're providing authority and guidance to them to do the job. We're following up with them, you know, with regular trainings, you know, updates, maybe, you know, there might be, you know, if you have the opportunity, maybe once a quarter, calling your volunteers, or even once a year, calling your volunteers and just finding out how things are going. What do they need help with? And then, you know, again, that's that ongoing communication. And utilization, again, you know, it's understanding what motivates a volunteer. If you have volunteers that have high social needs, which you're going to be able to recognize that, you don't put them in a room stuffing envelopes by themselves. That's probably not the right job for them. If you have volunteers that want recognition, you know, figure out how you can recognize them, even if it's just a shout out, you know, for some reason, in a newsletter or in a, you know, on social media, etc. Just, you know, and people who want to, volunteers who want to be in front of a group, find those opportunities for them. Maybe they're leading one of the, or, you know, one of the training sessions, or being the MC at achievement night, those types of things. And again, volunteers can always leave and volunteers can always be replaced. Now, what I mean by that is not necessarily the volunteer position can be replaced, but the person can be replaced. You know, sometimes we get volunteers who think that they are irreplaceable, and that's really, you know, that's really not the truth. They may have all the institutional knowledge in the world, but you know what, you'll find that when they leave, somebody else will step into that, you know, step up with that institutional knowledge. So, and that's why, you know, we don't like to fire volunteers, or I don't know if you want to use the term fire, but we don't want to have a volunteer, you know, get rid of a volunteer until we've figured out, is there another role for them, those types of things. Sometimes there is not, and they just need to go. And recognition. So recognizing our volunteers that contribute to the organization, it's really important. You know, this can be a formal and tangible, or it can be informal and intangible. You know, one of the things that probably I hear the most from volunteers, and I used to try to do this way more often, and I've been horrible about it, is just a simple written thank you note to them. So maybe you write it, you know, so maybe again, you could, every quarter you have a list of volunteers that you send quarterly thank you notes just for what they do in the program. You know, it doesn't have to be, it could be once a year that you send that thank you note, but you do them, you know, or you have these I'm going to do this month, etc. That's a pretty easy thing to do. Or it could be, you know, where you nominate them for awards, etc. Recognition should be ongoing. You know, we should be recognizing our volunteers on a regular basis. And the research is showing that volunteers that are recognized for their contributions are more likely to stay in the organization. One of the things that, if you saw the newsletter that was put out a couple of weeks ago for 4-H, it's going to be a quarterly newsletter that goes to all stakeholders, and one of the things that we want to do in that is to recognize a volunteer every time. And so, you know, if you have somebody that you want to recognize, just send it to me, and I will, you know, I'll have a running list of volunteers that we can recognize. You know, same with alumni. They're going to try to do some kind of alumni feature every time as well. So there could be an opportunity for that. And then evaluation. You know, just because they're a volunteer doesn't mean that they can't be evaluated. Now, what that means can look differently depending, but you should, you know, they can be conducted for each individual's performance and the effectiveness of the total program. And so you know, volunteers need that feedback. It can be a very informal feedback. You know, I honestly don't know of any counties that, or any, you know, anybody that has a full-blown, you know, volunteer evaluation. I don't think we need that, but it could just be a, you know, informal evaluation. And then it could be an evaluation be a two-way effort. You know, we evaluate the manager. Now, in some counties, sometimes do get, they do ask volunteers
for feedback on the 4-H staff person, on the paid staff person. And that can be done, but what needs to be made perfectly clear, if there's any, I know that we have several extension educators on here as well. You can do that. You know, when you're getting ready to evaluate your 4-H staff person, you can ask volunteers for feedback, but what they need to have is a firm understanding is that's only a piece of the evaluation, and that they do not dictate the paid staff, like, you know, what they do and their evaluation. They do not dictate if they get fired or not, those types of things. So that, you know, but it is a great, just like, I don't know if it happens anymore, but at one point when in this job, I think it was with the previous director, with my evaluation, he asked for feedback from the staff as part of my evaluation. And I know that, you know, the dean asked for feedback on our extension director at this time. They also, you know, I just did feedback on the CEO of National 4-H Council. So it is a very common thing to do. And then we also, you know, we're always asking volunteers for feedback on the program. And I think that we need to continue to do. In fact, one of the resources that I have is a tool that you could use for evaluating your program with volunteer, and then also a volunteer program. So. Okay, and then the next one that I'm going to share is the National 4-H Learning Priority. This was something that was put together a few years ago, and it's the volunteerism for the next generation. So there's a rubric and a syllabus. This is meant for 4-H volunteer or 4-H professionals to help you to create you know, a good volunteer system, and give you some resources for, I was just trying to open it so I could share it. And I don't think it's gonna. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing really quick and jump over so you guys can see this. Okay, so this is the document, and again, this is going to be in there. I just wanted to show it to you. I'm going to scroll through this really quickly. You guys are capable of reading this, but essentially in the PRKC, it kind of goes through that, but there's a lot of information in the beginning. So here we go. This could be the professional development plan. I'm trying, sorry, I should have been. Okay, so this is the topic. So the first one is developing and implementing an infrastructure for your volunteer. And so each statement, you check the column that best represents your ability. So they have these, you know, if you're a novice, if you're a practitioner, or you're an expert. So examples are define volunteerism and how volunteerism is critical to 4-H youth development or extension programs. So you would say, you know, it's a self-identification, but you can see, so this is that piece. And then what it does is it goes through an overview of what this means after you do the evaluation tool. It gives you some resources, so some great books that you could learn from, you know, if you wanted to. And then it also gives you some training opportunities, etc., for each one of the levels. So this is, again, you know, this is a piece that you can, you know, you can utilize in your, you know, for what you want. But I just wanted you to be aware. I personally think, you know, we've been having conversations about that, and it's like, you know, it's still a really good piece. I really like that document, even though, you know, it hasn't been updated for many years, but I still think it is a really good piece to have.
So it includes both volunteer development and volunteer management. So when you think about those two terms, volunteer development is the development of our volunteers, so training, etc. Volunteer management is what we do on a day-to-day basis with our volunteers. So, okay, again, you know, this goes through all of the topics. And then it includes the self-assessment, the resources, reading activities, and learning activities at each one of the levels. Then we have the VRKC. This is really for you to use with your volunteers. I will tell you, this is probably one of the best resources that you will have if you're looking for topics to do training for volunteers. This is where you go. They have a whole bunch of half-an-hour lessons. That you've got the lesson plan, so you know what you're going to say in each one. It's got PowerPoints with it, etc. VRKC is volunteer research, knowledge, and competencies. So the domains include communications. So there is a lesson plan on speaking skills, listening skills, writing skills, nonverbal skills, information delivery and dissemination, marketing and public relations, and the use of technology. Then there's organization, so planning and organizing, time management, parent recruitment and involvement, delegating tasks to parents, the service to community, and marketing and publicity. These are great. There's more, but these are great lessons. If you have a leaders council meeting or an advisory council meeting, when I was in the county, I always liked to try to throw in some kind of training with those. Not only do we just discuss, but I tried to get some education in there. And so pull one of these lessons out, you can do it. We've done several of these at the state level with volunteers. I know we've done, I think, time management. I think we've done planning and organizing and a couple, and then some of the other ones. But these are great. Program management, so structure, organization and structure of extension, upholding the 4-H mission. I think that was the last one that we did that at the spring training. Risk management, risk reduction, liability awareness and reduction, club management, behavior management. You can see all of these topics. There's tons in here. And then here's some more. There are 6 domains within that. And so, you can see all of those. And what's really nice is these are found on 4h.org under the professionals, and you'll have the link. I'm going to quickly show you one of the lesson plans. Oh, come on. Okay. It'd be really nice if I could just share and then move something over to a screen, but it doesn't let you do that. So this is an example of one of the lesson plans. So you have, what are the learning outcomes? What is the time that you're going to need? You have your supplies, what you should do ahead. Here's the introduction, what to do. It has the activities. You can see that. With the lesson plan, it has the, so you have the do and you have the reflect and you have the apply. And then there's also an evaluation tool, and there's ways, a lot of them have ways that you could enhance it or simplify the lesson. With each one of these lesson plans, you have the handouts. You have I think it's the handouts and then the evaluation tool. So it's all there. It's a grab and go. It's fantastic. So I highly, highly recommend pulling those out. I'm going to pull one more up. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint really quick for everybody to see, just so you can see an example of one of the PowerPoints. I don't necessarily, the PowerPoints are in a PDF form. So it's a little more difficult to, but you could, like usually if I'm going to teach one of these lessons, I just recreate the PowerPoint in our template, because I also don't like these colors. I think these colors are atrocious, but that's just my own personal, so I just recreate the PowerPoint. They're never more than like 12 PowerPoints, but I do recreate them in our template. So again, you can see this is the PowerPoint, and it tells you in the lesson plan when you need to be on each slide. So super easy. It's wonderful. So that's probably one of the best resources for volunteer development that we have. Okay. And then the framework for volunteerism, this is really was created for our professionals, again, to look at volunteer management and to help you understand what volunteer management and volunteer development should look like. Sorry. So there's areas on creating safe environments, engaging volunteers, administering volunteer management systems. I will share with you the handout for this. Again, one of very underutilized document that I still share with everybody because I still think it's critical. And you can see those. And then some of the other resources. So this is the access to the volunteer online training modules that are required. If as a staff person you haven't gone through these orientation modules, these are great tools for just to get an introduction. So you can see they will have to set up an account in this Canvas. We're working on trying to get a different way to offer these, but at this point, for the time being, this is the best way to do it. And again, these are on the state 4-H website. If you go on the left-hand side of the website, on the menu, there's a volunteer, kind of a volunteer area, and it says online training. That's where these are. And those are the 4 modules. These were put together by the Western Region volunteer specialists, and so everybody in the Western region actually uses these modules. So, and then the other piece on the 4h.org website, if you have not gone to 4h.org as a new staff person, I would suggest probably almost a whole day. I would go to that website and just familiarize yourself with it. There are some great resources on there. One of the resources that they have is one for professionals, and they've got all kinds of tools on there for you. I was doing a project with another person from another state, and we were trying around the PRKC, the Professional Research and Knowledge document, and we went on to 4h.org. We were looking for resources for new staff if they feel like they're lacking in a particular area, looking for resources that could help them. And we went on to 4h.org, and both of us are like, oh my gosh, we didn't realize this was all on here anymore. And so we really, even I've been doing this for a long time, and we have, I found new things on there. Is there training on working with youth with disabilities? I don't know, Nora, but I don't think that there's one on 4h.org, but it would, we could put out a call to see if anybody has one from other states. There's lots of trainings on underserved audiences, but I don't know if they're specific on disabilities. So, but remind me of that, and we will put a call. I'll put a call out and ask. So, okay. So I have about 15 minutes. I don't think it'll take too much more than that. on the service to community component. So we all know that, you know, one of the things when you look at the research with the Tufts study and for newer staff, oh gosh, it's been a couple of years since it was completed, but National 4-H Council commissioned a longitudinal study, so a long-term study. It ended up being a 10-year study of 4-H. What made 4-H different than other youth organizations? And it was done by Tufts University. So that's why we always call it the Tufts study. When you hear somebody talk about the Tufts study, that's why. It was done by Richard Lerner at Tufts University. He's one of the leading researchers in youth development. This ended up, they surveyed tens of thousands of children, both in 4-H and other organizations, other youth organizations. And it all kind of boiled down. There's lots of results for that. You'll see lots of statistics come out about that. But one of the biggest things that came out of that they found that made 4-H different than other youth organizations is our commitment to service. In fact, they added, there's 5 C's, and this is one of our orientation sessions, is some of the youth development theories. I think that's what we start next month. But there are the 5 C's of youth development, and like character, competency, I can't remember all of them right now, but they added a 6th C because of this study, and that is contribution. And so it really is critical that we make sure that our clubs and our youth are involved in this service to community. We don't necessarily always call it community service, because many of you know that when you talk about community service, especially with teenagers, it's a negative thing. They think of community service as something you have to do when you go to jail. We also don't talk about service learning. I mean, I would love us to get to the point where we're actually doing service learning, but it's really not. What we do is not service learning, because they are not doing the service and then coming back and having a good discussion about what they learned, how they can utilize it. You know, there's a whole educational component with service learning, thus the learning piece. Typically what most of our clubs do is they go out and they do a service project in their community to make a difference in their community. So I started calling it service to community. That's one of the terms that's used. So that's what you'll hear me say. And I love this quote: "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service to others," by Gandhi. So as we think about terms of service to community, so volunteerism, that is people who decide to perform a service to others without pay. Again, community service, this is community volunteering, perhaps as a result of a court order or probation sentence. Youth service is an overarching term, for all approaches that involve community youth as resources, and then experiential education, a term describing educational approaches that emphasize learn by doing. So service learning, this is a method for individuals to learn and develop through active participation. It's organized to meet community needs. It promotes civic responsibility. It builds the educational component to the program, encourages participants to reflect on the service experience, and it helps volunteers learn about their personal strengths or interests. An example that I can share that I think was really service learning. One of the things in one of the counties that I worked in, we used to do a Take the Day On project for Martin Luther King weekend. We called it Take the Day On, and it was actually an exchange program with another county. Actually, I think it ended up being 2 or 3 counties. We all came together within our state, and so one year these 2 very urban counties. It was this was when I was in Michigan, and it was Saginaw and Flint, I believe, were the 2 communities. Those are, you know, most of you have heard of Flint. Saginaw is another very urban community in that state.
they came to my very rural county. We had 16,000 people in our county, and our county was very, very large. Not as large as Nye County, but it was pretty darn close. It took us 2 hours to drive from one end to the other. And we had 2 islands, and it was just, it was a crazy community. We had 2 different tribal communities, etc. And so they came to my community. We worked with the tribe, and we actually learned about the tribal culture. We did, the tribe came in and did a lot of cultural things with us. And we stayed on one of the islands at a tribal facility. And we also talked about, because we were right on the Canadian border, like literally it was just a river that separated this area from Canada. We took those youth over to Canada, and we did a service project in Canada with, I can't even remember what the group was. I think it was a retirement home, a nursing home or something. And then we came back and had a long conversation about that service project. But also we were learning, it also tied in with the culture, because many of the residents at that facility were also tribal members. And so we kind of and we talked about the importance of elders within the tribal community. And so we really made it into a service learning project. The next year, I took my youth down to Saginaw, and we learned about the African American culture, and the service project evolved, or was some, I can't remember exactly. I think it was, we went into a school and taught a respect activity within the character counts curriculum, talking about different cultures and different, respecting different cultures and how to do that, and giving talking about that. And so again, we were learning about another culture, and we were teaching others about that, and then had a big long discussion. So that's an example of a service learning project. I also took many youth into many homes and cleaned homes for elderly that could not do it, or cleaned yards for elderly. That was a service project. That was just a service to community. There are 3 different types of service learning, or there's direct service, where we're providing assistance directly to members of the community. An example of this, working in a homeless shelter with people, or delivering food to people, etc. Indirect would be being involved behind the scenes to provide service. So this would be collecting food for a local food pantry. Another example is what we've been doing currently is our making face masks for community. That's an indirect involvement. And then advocacy, this would be seeking to resolve an issue facing a community. So an example of that would be advocating for sidewalk curb cuts for the disabled. We've had that. The other one, there's just a whole variety. And I just thought that picture of the ducks advocating, when I typed in advocate in like the looking for pictures, that's what came up, and I just thought it was funny. So I got to have a few funny pictures in PowerPoints. So, and again, community service versus service learning. Community service is not integrated into a curriculum. Into the curriculum, it's not service. It's just simply service, which is okay. I think we need to have a combination. Service learning, like community service, seeks to make valuable contribution to the community, but there's some kind of curricular goal. There's some kind of goal with that, and that we do provide education to the youth around that. So the importance of service in 4-H youth development, it's a perfect blend of organizing our community service and establishing our learning goals. It really should be more than just volunteerism. It should be the youth thinking about their community and what is a difference that they can make in their community. And really, it shouldn't be the adults figuring out what that service project is. We really should, and sometimes it comes up like the service project that we had with that we're having with the masks. There was a need in a community. They contacted us in 4-H. we worked on fulfilling that need. You know, and those are great, and we get those all the time. You know, when I was in the county, I always had people calling and saying, hey, can you bring a group of youth? Another one that we used to do every year was we would go to the local fairgrounds and we would paint all the garbage cans. Now, you know, we painted them all green with white clovers. We had a 4-H clover stencil, but probably didn't make the FFA kids very happy. But hey, when they ask us to do it, that's what they get. So the effects, or the elements of effect on service learning, you know, it engages our youth. It involves meaningful service. It develops problem-solving skills. You know, young people get those skills. They apply skills that they've learned. You know, one of the things I think it's like Alex, one of their clubs, the crocheting club, didn't sew masks, but they crocheted earpieces. So they use the skills that they learned in their 4-H project to then provide a service to their community. And that's a great, you know, that's a great tool. Requires cooperation and includes reflection. You know, even our clubs should be doing some kind of reflection after a service project. I think that's always important. You know, we always want to do, reflect, apply. So I've only got about 4 minutes left. So I'm going to be sharing with you a whole bunch of documents from other states on service projects that I think are really good, but, you know, closely involve all youth in aspects of the project experiences. So involving those 4-Hers during the planning stage, rather than presenting the project to them and expecting them to do it, involve them in those pieces. Selecting a project that they feel is important. You know, if you think that the 4-H club should focus on a project that consists of writing legislatures about a local community initiative, but they don't think that the youth in the organization don't feel it's important. It's more important to develop pamphlets for a local school on the hazards of drinking and driving. It's, you know, you need to think about that. I had a club one time that wanted to do goodie bags for Halloween, and so for some of our very low income schools in the community, and so they would put together these goodie bags, but in that goodie bag, not only there was very little candy, but there was the glow sticks, there was a reflector that the kids could put on a bike, or they could put, you know, on their body or whatever, that would reflect light. You know, there's a lot of those things that you can get from the National 4-H Mall, those types of things. So, and then they would put in a little flyer about 4-H, but they felt like that was was it really probably an important project? You know, but that's what they wanted to do. And so you really have to take their lead on that. Set goals that are clear but not too challenging. You know, obviously you can see, here's an example. You know, have them think about what's available in the community and the age of them. They probably, you know, might be easier to create posters and presentations for local schools on air quality rather than develop a school-based program on invasive species control. That one's a little, you know, I don't know many 4-H clubs that would do that, but, you know, just something, you know, that's an example. Plan a program that's appropriate for the age level. You know, if your 4-H club has mostly clover buds, and you want to have a simple project that they can complete with very little frustration. And again, there's lots of documents to help with this. So I think I have all of these plus a few others that I will be sharing with you that you can share with your clubs on how to plan a service project. I think that those are, that's important. And then again, you know, this is some ways to, you know, planning a service project gives you, you know, here's some specific things that counties should do or clubs should do. And then if you need to raise funds for the service project, again, you know, clubs need to remember all of the policies around that. Because there are some service projects that do require some funds.
And then publicizing, you know, there's some examples of how to publicize. Here's just an example. This isn't a 4-H event, but just a flyer. Making sure that they get the information out, that they, you know, that they're having these service projects. And then also, you know me and risk, we have to make sure that they are following risk management, you know, risk management policies. So again, you've got, you know, a few simple things. And then evaluating, you know, it's really important that they evaluate it once it's over. And the biggest thing is making sure that they celebrate that they did this. You know, they could have pizza party, they could have articles in the newspaper, certificates, you know, if they want to do a reward field trip, plaques. It's, you know, it's up to the club. One of the best things to do I've seen is kids go out and do a service project, and then you all come back together, you talk about it, you know, you're evaluating it through talking, and you're having a pizza party at the same time. So you're combining that celebration and the evaluation at the same time. It's also, you know, if you've got, you know, if you're doing this with an agency, you know, with a partner, invite them to the celebration. They may not be the ones that are, you know, doing the activity, but, you know, but invite them to the celebration. So here, you know, normally I would go through and have people give, if people want, I'm 1 minute over, so I don't necessarily want to do that, but think about some different types of service activities. You know, if you've got a club that focuses on animal science projects, what are some, you know, what's a service project that they could do in that project area? You know, if you've got shooting sports clubs, what's a service project that they could do in that area? You know, one thing they could do for a shooting sports club is if they use a range, you know, they could go through and pick up, you know, all of the leftover shells, all of the garbage that people leave. You know, there's lots of ideas that you could do. Okay. Any questions? I know that that was going through a lot, but any questions on either one of those? Or if you think of questions later, just feel free to send me a note or call, whichever one. Nobody has any. You can unmute if you want to, or you can type them in. It's up to you. Okay, one of my plans to do in the next day or so is I'm going to get all of the orientations from this year. So this is number 5, so I'll do 1 through 5. I'm going to send you the link in YouTube and also send you the link to the Nevada Box files for each one of those. And so that way everybody has all of them at this point. To this point, and you know, if you're jumping in kind of in the middle, then feel free to go back and watch the other ones. That way, you know, but I don't know if I've sent out the last couple. I think the last couple kind of fell in the middle of all of this, and I'm not sure if I sent them out. So I will make sure that everybody has all of them. So any other questions, comments? No? Okay, let me look really quick to see when our next one is, because I don't remember. Next one is July 9th. Good. I was making sure that it wasn't July 15th. I've been told I have to keep free all day because that's the day my son can get his driving permit. So it could take all day at the DMV. So I have to reschedule everything for that day. But so July 9th is our next session, and we're going to talk about ages and stages. So, you know, what's developmentally appropriate, and then the life skills model. So we're going to be getting the next, I think, 3 sessions are actually talking about some of the theory around youth development. So really good information as staff for you guys to have. Just a background of why we do what we do and how to make it successful. So, all right. Well, I will let everybody go and I will get this stuff out. I can't guarantee when I'll get it, but I will get this converted over and have Tracy caption it in the next couple days, and then I'll get everything sent to you guys. So thank you.